I'm going to walk through and talk about the show. You're welcome to follow along then. So, and one of the problems for artists is that it's the individual voice that's being threatened today. And that's what we have to preserve and do. And so you'll see a lot of that in this exhibition. And one of the ways that we start by accessing that individual voice is with collage. Hey, Kathy. So we start with collage because we want to access our unconscious, our collective unconscious. And when you start working this way, knowing that you're engaged in a psychological process, you're going to bump into the collective. You just can't help it. And so this collage is a collage that I did about the time that the Russians invaded Ukraine, and what is going on, and what am I going to do with that? Because we are connected to that. So came forth the apple. This also happened when Hillary was not elected. Was what am I going to do about that? I was shocked, I was amazed. Many of us took for granted that was going to be an easy win. It wasn't at all. And so this piece came out of those days of I must do something. I don't know what, but I must do something. And if you have that feeling when you're creating, where you know you want to do something, whether it's about what's going on in the world or whether you just feel stuck in your process, but that feeling that there's an urge, I want to, that's when I go to collage, because I want that voice from the unconscious to come forth. So I want to hear, how am I connected? What is it that I am to be focusing on? And so that's how this particular collage came forth and reminded me of the story of Adam and Eve and my concern about what's been happening to the feminine all along, all the centuries and centuries of it. And so here you see Eve offering the apple to Adam, and God in the middle at the top is very unhappy about this. This was our first challenge to God, that we have the audacity to bite that apple from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But we did it, and we are conscious human beings. So how do we develop that and see that? And our art is the way we do that. So here the apple has been bit, and my concern, actually now, it moves when you do this. Right now it's, how does the apple feel about being bit? And what do we do about that? So this is this, I must do something. I don't know what, but maybe it has to do with the apple, that first wake up. Because when Hillary was not elected, that was a wake up for me, that the feminine was going to have a tougher time than I thought. So these two pieces were my offerings to Mr. Trump. This was the first one, and I thought maybe if I offered an apple to the administration, that there might be an awakening of the feminine. This was in 2016, so you all know what's happened since then. It's quite different than that. The ruffles on her are an example of the feminine. Have no fear. This is just an apple I'm offering. No ulterior motives. She has some of the old imagery that I used years ago with the navigators. And the navigators are listening, they're taking in information, and they have backpacks that are made up of camera documenting equipment. So that documenting all along is what we as women have been doing, and that's what we're bringing to the table, is what we've been documenting for eons. So she offers the apple with her ruffles. Pay no attention to these ruffles. It didn't seem to take So this one is a little more the accoutrements of the feminine, more makeup, more ruffles, more enticement. After a few months, I began to realize that my apples were not of interest. And so there's a piece right over there next to that painting, which is called Reluctance, where I'm beginning to wonder, do I want to offer them up at all? And there's another piece in the main room called Eve's Lament, which is that worry of it. This is so many apples, so few takers. I love her. It's beginning to have a spoof on the whole thing. This went into the paintings of the apple in the Garden of Eden. This is the gathering of all the apples, that they're everywhere. There's so much. There's so much. This is also the apples in the Garden of Eden. And this was the first that I noticed when I did these marks, that, oh, perhaps this is the snake entering the Garden of Eden. And then the whole subject of Lilith came up, and the needed transformation of Lilith today. We need Lilith's wisdom and energy, but she's gotten a pretty bad rap. So we have a ways to go with her. This is also more of the apples in the Garden of Eden. These are watercolors, and then I come in with Sumi ink afterwards to identify. This is part of the navigators again. This is all of the information that we as women have, that we're bringing to the table. This is where the table in the Garden of Eden became very important to me. Lilith is offering the apple to Eve. She's been banished from the Garden of Eden, and Eve is then banished from the Garden of Eden for our having the audacity to bite from the apple from this tree. So we have been cast out of the Garden of Eden, and many of us women might feel that way about what's happened on the planet. So all of the work at this point has been, how do we get back into the Garden of Eden, and that we have a right to have a seat at the table of the Garden of Eden. So I started setting the table for the garden, and this is a result of that. The white parts represent the tablecloths that will be on the tables of the Garden of Eden. The tablecloths represent my great-grandmother, who came here from Holland to homestead in North Dakota. She arrived with her 8 children, all of her silver and china and linens, and a servant, to discover that she was going to live in a one-room sod house. And that was her life, and that was the life of many, many of us. All of us have got this kind of story in our background, that someone has done well enough in their lives here in the United States that you are able to be here today this way. And it's not likely that we'll be bombed, but it's possible. So we should give thanks for that every day. So this is in regard to my grandmother, who under those conditions embroidered all of our linen napkins with the initials of the family on them, keeping that beauty going, or the music that they love, but keeping alive the culture. And that culture is so important for us to be aware of, because it's the culture that they try to take down first. You know, the misunderstanding that some Ukrainians want the Russians to come because they're now speaking Russian. No, it's because they're not allowed to speak Ukrainian. They must speak Russian. And the same thing happened here to the Hispanic people coming here and having to adjust to. So we should be more aware of those kinds of pressures that we put on people. And this is my questioning about, will I or won't I anymore? And So this is the experience of the apple. This is how the apple feels when it was first bit. And these pieces are about the battle in the Garden of Eden for the apple. And so you see the monsters and the women and the offering. And so the paintings in this room began behind Maureen over there. That's the bite into the apple. And the next painting was I did the apple, but then I had the feeling of the stem. And I did the stem, but then I realized that the stem is actually the snake. And the snake wants to be a part of what's going on. And so the next two paintings are the, thank you, Merritt. The transcendence of the apple going through the process of the engaging snake. The pieces are all, this is setting the table for for all of us to arrive. These are the napkins for the table. And this is our arrival. The ruffles as the women are arriving. This represents the struggle to get there. And this is, again, the table, and the linens are set here. And this piece, this was an early piece in this process. This is Lilith offering the apple to Eve. And so you'll see over on this side, the apple in the hand of the offering is there. And I think then finally I'll comment on these. Again, that's more of that setting the table and the arrival. And these become more of the just loving the process of it. And this is, as I mentioned before, Eve's lament. So many apples, so few takers. And this is Eden, when the apples have arrived, but it's still going on, isn't it? So hereafter is the work of another 25 people that have been working in the same process, beginning with a collage as a way to get in touch with what is coming up in them, and then taking an image from that collage and progressing it. If some of you are familiar with Carl Jung's process of working with the unconscious, it usually happens in dreams, that if you were to take a dream to Dr. Jung, he would have you take an image from the dream and become it and live it out or work it out. But I think that the collages are another way to access that kind of information in the unconscious. And I haven't found another way. I suppose tarot cards or other ways that people have of doing that. But I think that the magazines today are such a gift. They are like the cave paintings of yesterday. And if you look at your magazine stands, you'll see the story of what civilization is interested in right now. And it depends on which shop you look in. You know, if you go into a 7-Eleven, you're going to find a certain kind. You know, if you go into a good bookstore, you're going to find another kind of magazine. And then some people say, oh, they cost so much. And yes, but consider how much your oil paints cost. Consider how much your paper costs. The magazines become quite an investment for me because they're telling me what's going on right now in the unconscious. The unconscious is expressing itself through that media. And that's a place that when we take that, go for that, then you'll see how people have taken an image and developed it, began to, what is that about? I want to know more about that. That kind of clicks in here. What could be going on with me? That's where the individual voice is born out of the collective unconscious. to which there is a great threat today. The money is being taken out of the art programs. Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C. will now be changed. Instead of a collection of the art of our time, it will be a collection of heroes of our time, and that's all going to change. What are we going to be hearing from the Kennedy Center, et cetera, et cetera. So our own Museum of Art and History has just been cut $250,000, and you know they're already in trouble. So it's coming right up to our doorstep. So I hope you can understand the kind of work that goes in. Each person has gone through this process of digging deep for their material, taking what it is that's meaningful to them, doing a maquette out of it in clay, or a drawing or a painting or a doodle of it, and taking that further into a sculpture. Like these pieces are maquettes for these pieces. So I usually do several smaller pieces, and then the one that becomes more important gets more attention. Walk through this way, and so would you say something about your paintings here?
They are mined from my collage, and they represent enigmatic kind of corners, and they're kind of power squares. They've definitely changed from the collage. There's something different. There's something more mysterious or more explosive. And then this one has images that come from both sides of the collage that meet together, to meet in the middle.
I love the way this one, you know, how the cat began to be an object for you to work with, a symbol, and how it shows up at the end of when you look through here. It's just such a great, I mean, you don't get very many chances to see it that way, do you?
No,
yeah.
Fantastic looking. Yeah,
it's such a beautiful painting, and your sculpture. What has it meant to you to work with this way and work with these images that, you know?
Well, you know, you never know what you're going to make when you do a collage.
Yeah.
And you pull things out, and some things repel you and some things attract you. And you've always encouraged us to don't just turn and throw away the part that repels you. At least keep a few of those in.
Yeah.
And the middle section might represent ourselves. So I think you worked with me quite a bit, and this was a repelling image. This was clearly me. You know, there were these wolves below. They could have been friendly. They could have been attacking. So I had to work it out. So we did this, and the wolves are here. And then I did that, and
they're
the wolves
here.
are here. And
yes.
They're more benevolent here than they are there. This was all during the time right up before the election. And there was just so much anger going on between the two parties, and you know, nobody could get it. Nobody was happy, and it seemed like we were pulling apart as a nation. So that's what this feels like. And then this protective, kind of Madonna-like woman, trying to keep it all, everyone's safe, trying to keep everyone safe. So that's what it feels like. And she's a protector, so she's Our Lady of Perpetual Protection.
Yes.
And then she's here, and then the cat then becomes a little bit less in need of being protected, and some of these images have shown up in paintings on the other room. This one, that one, and one more. Oh, and then one was a combination of images. But it felt like a response to the times in which we lived. That's what it really felt like.
It's so much a part of the process. If you invite the unconscious, you're going to get the collective. You can't avoid it. And so how do we sit with this which is going on? You know, how do we hold ourselves together, and also to stay in touch with our senses? You know, often animals show up in the collages, and I think that that is because we've lost sense with our animal nature. And if we were more in tune with our senses like an animal is, maybe a lot of things might not have happened that have happened. I felt that with Hillary's loss, that at that time it was, oh, I should have known. I should have known. I just laughed it off, but I should have known. And I think that that's what the cats and this kind of business that's going on at the same time, that it's important for us to stay in touch with our senses, with what we think we're hearing, what's going on. Yeah. So I think that if I just point out the process itself, that out of the collage and the painting, you see her style. Her style becomes very obvious, and that shows up over and over in her work. You know, you just can't help. She can't help doing this kind of a mark, and so then the subjects themselves become more and more important, so that they get developed more and more. And this is Leah Watson, and her is the same thing. Her collage, the importance of music in her life, and from her childhood, and so it's like the early memory of that, and then the memory of the music itself in her life, and the gold, the little gold pearl that she's dropping into the sound of the music that comes from that. Ode to Yoho, made in the time of COVID. Beautiful. Yes, okay. And Jessica, her dive into her seahorses coming out in these, and of course her style, which is very much like this. And her attempt to go from the literal to the abstract and still be saying what it is that she wants to say. So here is a rather Lilith-looking figure that gives energy to what it is that she wants to set on fire and move. And all of this movement comes out of something that's very rigid at first. Maureen's story up here, it just evokes, the collage evokes the writing. And so this piece comes out of this here. And then moving more into the abstract of this here. You know, it's hard to understand abstract work when you just look at the cold result of a piece. But when you see how the process, it begins to make sense. You know, and that's that great Kandinsky comment about how it must be comprehensible. You know, we dig deep for it, but how do we make it comprehensible to others? This is wonderful, the way this has been pushed to this, and this, to this. And this we will see more of in the next room. But this imagery, here's her collage, the deep dive, and she works with it over and over. You'll see in the next room. But this piece here is an example of beginning that dive work. Here's Barbara's, the rest of her diver. And what would you like for us to see? What does that have to do with this?
Well, I took the people that are falling, this shows people falling through space, and I took these two people and put them in here. I made it into a diorama so that you...
So you wanted to capture this falling into space? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so here is the figure diving into space, and then her collage is around the corner by the door that you'll see. This has been an image that you've been progressing, working with, before it was diving into the water, and now it's coming out of space, but it moves for you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. This is Margarita Alvarez. Her collage and her painting and her PowerPoint, which she put together in order to become a certified art and spirit teacher. And Margarita has a deep connection to her Hispanic roots. And so just going to that from time to time, I think it deepens our heart for the work. This little piece is a beautiful example. It says so much about the individual, you know, on a mission to be seen. And I know that her work was inspired by the immigration thing that's happening right now, of people trying to get someplace in their lives. And so she's gone after the imagery that they may be actually seen. She calls this the immigrants. And Lynn is doing the same thing. I love this image that she's done of the bowl and the self coming out of the bowl, the self coming out of the fire, the self coming out of the true self, this whole marriage of it needing to come together. So she took that further, and here is the piece that came forth out of that process, realizing that she's going through this in her life right now, that it's entering into a new period in her life, and this helps to concretize what it is that we want to be building in our lives at this time. And Jeanette Miller went to Viola Frey. I encourage people to go to other artists to learn from. And this is her image of a piece that Viola Frey did. So she did Viola Frey's self-portrait. And then we have her own desire to be free in her work. It's a beautiful platter. The sun and the moon platter. Here. Savarna Wiley, her internal work in her collage. And this had a lot to do with setting boundaries for her, blessings and boundaries. And again, entering into a new phase in her life. And so wanting to protect the space of that phase. And so it's interesting how you do the collage and you begin to talk about the collage, and pretty soon you realize what these images mean to you. What is this boundary thing? You know, what's happening for you with these hands? What is it they are saying? And pretty soon the images come out of that voice. And Merritt's voice. Integration. So this piece obviously comes out of this piece. I recall you're doing this with this very beautiful figure coming out of this. And this is what we're living with now. And what voice do you choose to develop and to know more about in order to counteract that much going on in the collective right now? This side of the collage is about the collective. It comes from the unconscious, where over here we get more conscious, more about what it is that we're doing. This would, in the Jungian sense, be a transformation of an animus, if I may play with your collage, Merritt. You see a very dark animus here, which is the masculine character. Each of us has our own individual masculine that enables us to do what it is that we do. So these are incredible characters that came up for her. And then a transformation takes place, which evidently involves the feminine. And out of that comes a new kind of animus. This is a protector, a soldier, a person on a mission. And you see just the transformation from there to there. And in the meantime, what's happening to the feminine that comes forth out of this. So this is a good example of taking the imagery and working with it. And the red is always so important. I thought, looking at them this way, where did this come from when it comes to looking at the red, which I often say, follow the red in your collage. And until one day we had a professor from the University of Sao Paulo in their art education department came and did a ed credit workshop and started talking about these kinds of images in paintings. They don't do collage, but they do paintings. And she said, and of course you always look for the red, that the red will follow you through. And there's a kind of, I recall her saying, the Ignacio of the red. She said, you watch your client, and there's a moment where they uncross their legs, or they reset themselves in the chair, or they put their coffee cup down. This moment of Ignacio, that you want to catch, that there's something there that's wanting to come up. And it's so true in these collages. You can see it and follow it through. So, or fire, like here. This is wanting to come forth out of here, and look at it up here. Look how it develops. And these become this, as the artist's voice starts to speak. The kind of doodle, the kind of mark that one makes, and starts to speak. So it's like even a little piece of red like this is enough to know that wants to happen. How is it going to happen? What does it have to go through to happen? This is what's happening. And you see it just barely sprinkled through there. And then there's what is it that one must go through to do that? Because this wants to come forth, but it has to deal with these dragons here first. This dragon head coming through, this darkness. And her sculpture, yes. This sculpture has 3 sides to it, and her work has a lot of a Mayan look to it, or ancient look to it. She's a traveler, and that shows up in her work. And so there are 3 figures here, and I wish it was on a turntable so we could look at all 3 sides, because that's the way it should be seen. Hard for us also to look at sculpture. It's the last art form, is sculpture in a culture, because it calls for a 3-dimensional eye and a 3-dimensional mind. So we're very 2-dimensional in our culture with looking at television, and things are flat. And so when we move something from a magazine picture that is very 2-dimensional, and then we paint it, it becomes real, it becomes ours, it's in our world, our field. But then when you make it into something 3-dimensional, something else happens, another being has arrived at the table. It's a 3-dimensional thing. How do you do that? And I was surprised when I first started with sculpture at how much my hands know about the back of it. You can't see the back of the model, but your hands know, your body knows. We're very intelligent 3-dimensionally, but we're not using that kind of intelligence, and that comes from the unconscious. That's where it is. Janet, this one, beautiful. These are beautiful pieces.
So, Coeleen, this came out of the weekend at Mount Madonna.
Oh, some of you might have been at the Mount Madonna workshop last January, and there will be another one this January. So the collage happened at Mount Madonna?
It did.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, it was that kind of resetting where I am, where in my head, and what is it that's happening. So for me, it was absolutely being in a sacred space and about sacred places for me, and wanting to, I think I have been focused on building vessels as containers for my grief, containers for hope, for possibility. And I think learning how to build them differently, build them stronger, and build them with bolder colors. So I'm getting out of my head and more into what it is that, and just letting it show up. So these are very evocative of what my collages look like. So it was very...
Say something about your glazing technique here and what you were doing there.
So one of the things that we've all learned from you is that as artists show up in our collages, you invite us to explore their work further. So this is Elaine de Kooning, and I have long been attracted to the abstract expressionist, and particularly the females in that whole era. And we went down to the Palm Springs exhibit years ago. So it's that kind of grounding. But for me, I took a deep dive. I started reading about her, buying more books, and looking at what can I learn from her. And one of the things that you invited me to do is just to start to play with color the way that she does, to start to do it enough to learn what does that feel like, what's the energy in her work that I can then bring into this work.
Yeah, and you got it. You got it. It's just beautiful to see this happening here. Very, very good. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Jane Edberg, and this is an issue that all of us women deal with, and that's the aging body and what happens to beauty. And so these are images of herself going through the aging body. And what does she see? She's a very professional artist, and so she's able to take her work a long ways, and very good at ceramics as well. So this was her progressed collage. So after she had done the original collage, then she took images out of the original and made a smaller piece of it, which is something that we all do. And so this is the progressed collage. And so then it was, we'll make a vase of this. So this image in the collage, this woman is laying in the street, actually, and she's on a path that is painted red, and then there is this form. So Jane made the form and laid the woman on top of the form like this, and she was going to walk away from it and said, wait a minute, that red, what are you going to do about that? And that's how this wonderful edge came out. It's beautiful, and so she's using it more in her work. And Ina Nabrunning did this one. And this is a painting, we call them Rockies, which is another story, but I learned from a woman named Rocky. But this painting has this beautiful sensitivity in it. And so to progress that to here, what would you say, my dear, about that?
Okay, well, this was also during the time just before the election. My collage is in here, but it was all about the anger and the frustration. So I kind of took that into the colors in the watercolor, but this for some reason just showed up, and I said, I want to look at what that's about, because I can't just keep staying in this heavy, angry place. So I called it looking into where there might be some beauty and peace. And so I did this piece, and then I thought, well, what if I or she or the feminine went in there? And that's what happened.
All right. Yes. She had an experience. Yes, that was it. Yeah. Good. Well, there's a couple more around the corner of Sharon Bosley and Maya Delano. Her clean of the feminine. And then Sharon Bosley, her work with children. Sharon does not have children herself, but she worked as a therapist in county mental health in San Jose. And so this work gets very, very beautifully done. Your collage to your painting, would you have something to say about this?
Well, actually, I was there a little earlier, and I said the collage was such an instructive with the ISIS, and it opened a door that I never would have believed.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no,
Perfect.
it's very, very important.
Yeah. It does that, doesn't it? You would have never thought of that if you hadn't done it. I know, yeah.
And I think that earlier you had talked about the unconscious working. I mean, because these pieces are not new. They're old pieces that I made over the years.
Yeah.
But they achieved a new place once I had the awareness about ISIS and the
Yes.
archetypes, etc.
Yeah, what you wanted to say here and here. Yes, yeah. Maya, I just walked by yours and said something about the queen of the feminine.
Oh, yeah.
But is there something that you would say about yours?
Well,
Did you do this from your collage?
so I did, yeah, so I actually took, as this whole process, I took and went back into collages that I've been doing for 15 years and pulled out images from the very beginning of this kind of extreme feminine person. And then this is the most recent one and all the stuff in between. So even though we're around the corner here, I pulled all these images together, created a collage from my old collages, and then applied a lot of this doodle concept and the rocky concept of highlighting into these pieces. So one of the conversations that you and I had was, being careful of the ultra feminine, that glossy magazine thing that goes on now these days, especially. But I really wanted to honor that extreme side of the feminine. But what's not really known for me in the process is all this old, strange symbology. So even though it's not like, I'm not spelling it out, this is called the Bay in the Wild. So even though she's doing this ultra feminine thing, this is all the doodles from when I was like 5. So it's a kind of a play. And so you can see these real childlike images. This is way ahead of me, and so I've actually, the butterfly, so I've actually, in our conversations and process, have gone back to the cocoon. And so I am just drawing right now, I'm doing the cocoon with a little face over and over again, and playing around with that. So some of that imagery has come out, but it's still interesting to see and do collage when something's so ahead of you, you don't know what's happening. But the process led me to step back, take a breath. What's really going on, and it's really, awakening the self, the cocoon. So
there she is with
Yes.
her butterfly ruffles.
yeah, she's got her little ruffles.
But she's in black and white. We'll have to see her in color soon.
So it's being played with. So she's wrapped in a cocoon, but the cocoon is, the wings are outlined in the cocoon. So, and then I learned that the butterfly has to go through a lot of friction because when it goes into the cocoon, it becomes like DNA soup. It has to go through all this friction to help the wings and the strength finally explode, or open up and fly. So I'm not there yet, but we'll see. And then this collage piece has a lot of the in-between stuff. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
This is such a good example of how we learn from the animal that we choose, or the animal that chooses us.
Yes.
That it has its particular issues. Yeah. How do you end up with this from that?
Okay, there's a tilted figure here that's actually from that show at the Dion of Chinese art fashion. And she seems to almost be in a ballerina skirt. So the dancer is something that keeps coming up in my work, as well as babies and babies' faces. I'm not sure if it's the babies I should have had or if I'm the baby, because it does have red hair, which I did. And then we have a guardian figure here, the woman in black, and then the arches. So something that keeps recurring in my work are the arches and the dancing figure. And the guardian here is very abstract. In here, in the maquette, it's a little more visible. And at the end of the corridor of the maquette, this way, is the divinity figure, be it Jesus or whomever,
So this,
at the end of the tunnel.
So this comes out, or this comes out of this,
And you can
the
see the
same
red
farm.
cauldron
Yeah.
and the red paper and the red feathers coming out, connecting. And then here is the baby's face. And then we have the dancing figure with the gold and blue stripes right there.
Yeah.
And I also pictured mothers of all different races and ethnicities in this that are caught in all these different places, including the Egyptian mummy that's right behind the ear up there. So I was prepared to do a larger figure with the arch, but I did something that was very unusual for me, and that is to simplify, because I always tend to make things complicated. So I reduced it to just, as we see, the dancing figure, but she's a wounded dancer. And on the back here, more of her wounds and her womb, where there's a baby's head upside down and a scraggly, damaged baby's head. And of course the big baby here underneath her leg holding that up. And I felt like she was kind of an echo of Galatea, Pygmalion's creation, who was a statue that came to life via Venus's blessings. And I was thinking of today how the ideal woman, you could create an AI, but here this woman is running away from the ideal, showing her wounds, her dents, her golden breast, despite it all.
Can she have a seat at the table? Yeah, will they let her in?
They're starting to fold up.
Okay. Can she have a seat at the table?
Art and spirit.
All right. Thank you.